I found a second wedding ring in my husband's drawer. At first, I thought there was only one explanation. Another woman, another proposal, maybe another life he had been hiding from me. Then I turned the ring over and saw something that made my heart stop. My name. But there was one problem. The date engraved inside the ring was from 2 years before we ever met. I confronted my husband that night. I expected anger. I expected excuses. Instead, he went completely silent. Then he looked at the ring and whispered, "You were never supposed to find that." And suddenly, I wasn't wondering who the ring was for. I was wondering, why had he kept it for 20 years, and what happened before our marriage he never wanted me to know. What would you do? Confront him immediately, or find the truth first?
I wasn't looking for anything that night. I was searching through my husband's dresser for an old document he'd asked me to find. Nothing unusual, until I opened the bottom drawer. Behind a stack of folded shirts was a small black jewelry box. I almost ignored it. Then I noticed the box was old. The edges were worn, like it had been opened and closed many times. I picked it up, and something inside moved. A ring. A wedding ring. My first thought was simple. It wasn't mine. I knew the ring my husband wore. I knew the one I had placed on his finger years ago. This was different. I slowly opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band. No diamonds, no decoration, just a ring that looked like it had been waiting there for years. My heart started beating faster. Then I turned it over. There was an engraving inside. At first, I couldn't make out the letters. Then I saw it. My name. I stared at it for several seconds. My name was engraved inside a wedding ring that I had never seen before. But then I noticed something even stranger. A date. 2 years before we ever met. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Suddenly, every possibility I had tried not to imagine came rushing into my mind. Who was this ring really for? And why, after all these years, was my name on it? I put the ring back in the box, but I didn't put the box back in the drawer, because now I knew one thing. Whatever happened in my husband's life before me, he had never told me the whole story. I didn't confront my husband immediately. I couldn't. I needed to understand what I had found before I asked him a question I wasn't prepared to hear the answer to. The next morning, I looked at the ring again. My name was still there. So was the date, 2006, 2 years before we met. I tried to remember where I was back then. Different job, different apartment, different life. And most importantly, I didn't know my husband yet. So how could my name possibly be engraved inside a ring he had kept since then? I waited until that evening. When he came home, I watched him carefully. He kissed me, asked about my day, put his keys on the counter. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't stop thinking about that little black box. Finally, I asked, "Do you remember 2006? He froze. Not for long, just a second, but I noticed. He looked at me and asked, "Why are you asking?" I didn't answer. I simply placed the ring on the table between us.
His face changed instantly. The color seemed to disappear from it. He didn't touch the ring. He didn't even look at me. He just stared at that small piece of gold. Then he whispered, "Where did you find that?" And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't some forgotten piece of jewelry. He knew exactly what it was, and whatever happened in 2006, he had been carrying it with him for 20 years. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. My husband kept staring at the ring. I stared at him. And for the first time in our marriage, I saw something in his eyes I couldn't explain. Fear. Not anger. Not frustration. Fear. I asked him again, "Who was this for?" He finally reached for the ring. But before he could touch it, I pulled it away. "Don't," I said. "Not until you tell me the truth." He looked down. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "Her." One word. That's all it took. My stomach dropped. I asked who she was. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to an old cabinet in our bedroom and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photograph. A younger version of my husband stood beside a woman I'd never seen before. They were smiling, young, happy, in love. At least, that's what it looked like. I turned the photograph over. There was handwriting on the back. 5 words. The life we almost had. I looked at my husband. "So you were going to marry her?" He shook his head. "Not exactly." That answer made everything worse. I felt my chest tighten. The ring had my name. The photograph belonged to another woman, and the date was from a time when I wasn't even part of his life. Then I noticed something. The woman's finger was bare. No ring, no engagement ring, nothing. I looked at my husband again. If this wasn't for her, I held up the ring, then why does it have my name on it? He closed his eyes, and for the first time that night, I realized the secret wasn't about another woman. It was about the man my husband had been before he ever met me. My husband finally sat down. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he looked at the ring in my hand and took a slow breath. It was never meant for her. I didn't understand. The woman in the photograph? He nodded. I loved her, he said, but the ring wasn't a promise to marry her. I waited. He told me that in 2006 his life was falling apart. He was young, reckless, and constantly making promises he couldn't keep. The woman in the photograph had believed he would change. He promised her he would, and for a while he believed it too. So he bought the ring, not because they were getting married, but because he wanted something that represented the man he promised to become. Then everything fell apart. He broke that promise. She left, and the ring stayed behind. I looked at the engraving again. My name. Then why my name? He looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. Because I engraved it years later. I couldn't speak. He explained that after we met, he finally understood what he had been trying to become all those years ago. A better man, a husband, someone capable of keeping his promises. He had the ring re-engraved with my name, but he never gave it to me. Why? His answer was almost a whisper. Because every time I looked at it, I remembered that I almost became someone you would never have trusted. That hurt more than I expected. Not because he had loved someone before me, but because he'd carried the memory alone for 20 years. He thought hiding it was protecting our marriage, but he had never asked me whether I wanted to know. I looked at him and realized something. The secret wasn't another woman. The secret was his shame. And suddenly, I had a harder question to answer. Could I forgive someone for hiding the past if the reason he hid it was because he was ashamed of who he used to be?
I thought the truth would make me feel better. It didn't. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the ring in front of me. For 20 years, I had believed I knew everything important about my husband. Now I realized there was a part of his life I had never even seen. He came into the kitchen and sat across from me. He didn't try to defend himself. He didn't ask me to forgive him. He simply said, "You have every right to be angry." I looked at the ring. Then I looked at him. "I'm not angry that you loved someone before me." He nodded. "I'm angry because you decided I couldn't handle the truth." He lowered his eyes, and for the first time I understood that his secret wasn't necessarily about betrayal. But that didn't make the secret harmless, because trust isn't only about what we do. Sometimes it's about what we choose not to tell. I asked him one final question. "If you could go back to the day you met me, would you tell me everything?" He thought about it, then said, "Yes." "Why?" He looked at me. "Because you deserve to know the whole man you were choosing." I reached for the ring. For a moment, I considered giving it back. Instead, I closed my hand around it. Not because everything was suddenly okay, not because I had forgotten what he had hidden, but because I realized something important. We weren't deciding whether his past was forgivable. We were deciding whether our marriage could survive the truth about it. And maybe that's the hardest part of love. Sometimes the question isn't, did they betray you? Sometimes it's, can you still trust them after finally knowing who they were? I looked at my husband, and I still didn't know what my answer would be. But for the first time, I knew I had the right to choose.
When a secret isn't an affair. The hardest part about a secret isn't always what happened. Sometimes it's the fact that someone you trusted decided you didn't deserve to know. Your partner can have a past. They can have memories, regrets, mistakes, and relationships that existed long before you entered their life. That doesn't automatically make them unfaithful. But when a secret is kept for years, it can create a different kind of wound. Because eventually, you may stop asking, "Who was she?" and start asking, "Why couldn't you trust me with the truth?" That's where love becomes complicated. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the secret didn't hurt. And honesty doesn't mean someone has to reveal every detail of their past. The real question is whether the secret has crossed a line that affects the trust between two people. Maybe privacy is necessary in a healthy relationship. Maybe transparency is. Or maybe every couple has to decide where that line is for themselves. So let me ask you, if your partner hid a painful part of their past from you for 20 years but never cheated, would you forgive them? Would you want to know everything? Or would you rather let the past stay in the past? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've lived through something similar, share your experience only if you're comfortable. No names, no private details, just your story. Because sometimes the story we are afraid to tell is the story someone else needs to hear. Every secret has a story, and every story has a choice. For 20 years, he kept that ring hidden. Not because he was still in love with someone else, but because he was ashamed of the man he used to be. And maybe that's what makes secrets so complicated. Sometimes the truth doesn't destroy a relationship. Sometimes hiding the truth does. I don't know if you would have forgiven him. Maybe you would have walked away.
Maybe you would have stayed. Maybe you would have needed time before you could trust him again. But there's one thing we can all agree on. You deserve the right to make that choice for yourself. So tell me, would you forgive your partner for hiding something like this for 20 years? If you've experienced something similar, share only what you're comfortable sharing. No names, no private details, just your story. Like if this story made you think. Share it with someone who might see this situation differently. Subscribe to Tribal Survival Feast for a new emotional story every week. Every secret has a story, and every story has a choice.